one sentence that was said by Ian is higher education to be seen as a strategic agent for national development. One point was said by Dr. Allam. International companies used knowledge management to achieve economical edge. I remember also that we mentioned the education challenges, several of them, like lack of awareness and or understanding of knowledge management economy, lack of time, is it a priority or not, lack of strong management support, culture and change management, opposition of technologies. And then also there was a slide about how the world sees the Arab countries. And there was also a point of understanding the nature of problems and challenges and opportunities in the Arab countries is very difficult for many who are outside the territory. There was a slide about higher education and how it's related to people, ideas, cooperation, capacities. And there was, again, we had Ian or Dr. Bathgate, and what I didn't write from the first slide, but you put it again, is actually related to the university here, is about the, if I should say, I don't know if it's the mission, if you'd like to call it, it's the empowering our students and staff to become engaged, change agents in their communities. And this was very clear in your, actually in the slides, in the presentation, that it's very important not just the knowledge we give the students, but the student experience, and that research is directed to solve local problems, and also the curriculum is engaged curriculum, so it's learning by doing, and the importance of how everything is directed towards building the entrepreneurship into the students and innovation, and to have them also, or to make them serve the local communities, like examples, even the school students and so on. Even your department is doing that as well. And then we had Dr. Fawzan, Kuwait, talking about the role of the Bureau. And what was 2 points I wrote that I found them important is that they take care also of when they send the students in the specializations that they study here, that it should be fitting the local needs. So they have a strategy, and based on it they send specific specializations here for study. The other thing is how to build the relationship between universities in Britain and in Kuwait. He didn't talk about educational programs, he actually specifically talked about the research labs. That asking British University expertise to build parallel labs in Kuwait, advanced labs, and 1 year training for the staff members in Kuwait. And this helps to create more of the research environment needed back in Kuwait, which why would be our postgraduate students who come here, for example, don't want to go back to our countries, because we don't have the proper research environment. So this is to help creating the proper research environment. Then we had a presentation from Professor Amer, Bahrain, and there were a few sentences like a key word for knowledge economy is innovation. So innovation is very important, and that because knowledge economy is driven by ideas, and this is why higher education plays important role, if we see it this way. And the knowledge economy requires investment in human. And but then he stressed very clearly that we in the Arab countries, we don't have the main pillars of knowledge economy.
Absolutely.
Sadly, this is how he sees it. I don't know how to see it this way. I would say that we have a bit longer way, but and he mentioned he mentioned the pillars of the knowledge economy. I don't need to repeat them. Actually, I have them written, but just to save you time. And also he mentioned, of course, the importance of encouraging the involvement of the private sector. Then we had a talk about the situation in Maghreb region, but it also included Egypt, so we changed this word to North Africa. And it's one of the main issues addressed is about the unemployment and how we have a really employment challenge. And he talked about this, I didn't know the percentages, the percentage of those who are working in the informal sector, and it's really high in our countries. So it's an unemployment issue, very clearly. He also talked, of course, about the knowledge workers in proportion to the total labor. He talked to globally, it should be by 2020, 60%. This is global. He also talked about the World Bank recommendations, which are very interesting. We had a presentation from Qatar, and she talked about the educational reform in Qatar and what happened in it, and it's actually started from the 1990s in terms of the higher education, we're talking about it, attracting more international campuses in Qatar, as well as attracting international expertise to help in the reform of the existing Qatar University. Qatar University itself, the reform started from 2003 and took all the way to 2008. And it's not only about the graduates meeting the labor economy, but also to meet the international standards. So quite a number of their faculties or departments are internationally accredited in 2014. But it's also, there is the target of increasing the graduates with the knowledge-based specializations or knowledge-based workers, and it reached its target, which is 67%. And they also invested heavily in the research and development and having the Qatar Foundation. And Qatar University is receiving more than 70% of the research fund. But she also talked about the Qatar education challenges, and it's mainly related to the school education at the moment. And then last but not least, we had a presentation about Ahliya University in Bahrain. And this was the first private university, and it's been going on for the last 16 years, but it's also #1 in Bahrain in terms of private universities. It has students from 28 nationalities. It has international partnerships and international exchange programs. It has 80% of its graduates are either at work or they are doing further studies. And there is a 90% student satisfaction when they do internship, etc. And they have, as a university, they have full confidence from NAQAID, the Quality Assurance, National Quality Assurance Accreditation. They still need to do further work when it goes to the research culture. I must say that we ended with 2 case studies, although we're giving a gloomy sort of picture of the Arab countries in terms of the knowledge-based economy, but yet we had 2 cases presentation regarding Qatar and the Ahliya University, which are successful cases, so it's a bright side. So we had both. We had a gloomy picture and we had bright side, luckily at the end. And now I guess we can open the discussions, please.
I just wondered, and thank you very much for that very detailed reflection and overview of, did we discuss a lot today? It certainly increased our knowledge base anyway. I was wondering, do you think the traditional university model is defunct? Is it fit for purpose in today's knowledge economy? Do we have to do something different in order to address this youth unemployment? And it's not just in Africa, North Africa. In Greece, they have 50% youth unemployment, 50%, and Italy is going that way as well. So all along that Mediterranean coast, this is a huge, huge issue. So, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I was going to take this as my starting point for the discussion. The end product of the university is the student, the graduate. Unfortunately, in the current time, the graduates of most of the universities, most of the graduates of most universities, there is this phenomenon Professor Ahmed has mentioned, is the lack of talent. They don't fit in the employment market, which is the title of this workshop or seminar talk is higher education and economy, knowledge economy, which is, I take it to mean as university education and employability of these graduates of these universities. Yes, there are so many graduates from this, but as I said, they don't find jobs easily. That is not entirely their fault or their part, but employers repeatedly say or claim that they're looking for talent. They can't find talent. I read in an article or a brief of a discussion in which the founder of Byte.com participated. He said 60% of employers do not find the applications successful. And this is, I know Byte has a large, huge database for applicants for work. And I think it has to do with what you've just mentioned, the way these students were taught, the education, the structure itself. If I take the example of the Arab world, when I say Arab world, I mean both the Maghreb, the Gulf, even Sudan, Egypt. Sudan is a special case because historically there were 4 or 5 universities which were very good universities up until the 1980s, but suddenly there is a huge horizontal expansion, more than 50 universities, but the level, it was, I would say, quantitative expansion at the expense of quality. The graduates of all these universities are, I wouldn't compare them at all to the graduates of those 4 universities. So it was sort of political driven expansion, not a real expansion to cater for the real needs of the country. And leaving Sudan aside, also the Arab universities in the Arab world is being criticized as with this lack of harmony between the graduate or universities or teaching structures and the actual need for development in these countries. Some countries try to solve this, like for example Saudi Arabia and Qatar, with 2 different approaches. Maybe United Arab Emirates is included as well. Qatar has adopted, as we see in Dr. Haynes said, they have invented these satellite universities, 8 satellite universities, but there is now criticism for this model. People now are starting to criticize or to question the sustainability of this model due to the high level of expenditure on this. According to the Washington Post, I think they spend $400 million a year on only 6 institutes out of these 8. How can this be sustainable in the future? Another big, I wish if Dr. Hind was here to reflect on this, but unfortunately she's left. Also this, there are voices that voice concern that this model has undermined the local education system in Qatar. Qatar University and other institutes, I don't know all of them, but because the government or the ruling system there, they focus on this education city, which is run by QF, Qatar Foundation, which is headed by Sheikh Hamouza.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit strange model. Well, she said it's successful, I hope it is. So they focus on building universities, but again, bringing experts from well-known universities, and at the same time focusing on sending students on full scholarship programs. They have now, I think, more than 180,000 students, both in the States, in the UK. In the UK alone, I think they have around 30,000 students. But again, will this solve the problem of the integration, of the involvement, of bringing talent? I think it's...
No, can I respond?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You see, what is happening, education is important, and you graduate students from universities. The question that you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do with them? Which simply mean, if you're not going to create jobs for them, then the whole investment in education is wasted. And if you look at the model of South Korea, now I mentioned in my presentation that there is, I don't know whether you read this report, it's called the Arab Knowledge Report 2014, and it was published by United Arab Emirates. And the title of that, Localization of Knowledge. We simply mean looking at the local development when the whole localization of knowledge, and this is borrowed from South, basically Korea model. We simply mean South Korea forced universities to basically graduate students with certain skills. But by the time these graduates get out of the university, their jobs were ready for them. And that's what we talked about. The institutional structure of the state is important. Now, many of these countries, they have vision, but most of them, they don't understand what is a vision and why do you want to have a vision. They have vision, but just for the sake of the paper. So it simply mean that if you're not going to utilize your basically students, and that's what I said again, most students, if you ask them, you want to stay in your country, the answer will say no. Most of them, they leave because they don't find basically the jobs available to them. So that's why the localization of knowledge, and that's, we simply mean that knowledge has to be somehow deeply rooted in the culture, in the social, in the economic, in the environmental. You see, a farmer is working a farm, but the environment of that farmer is not the same as the environment in America. So the knowledge of that farmer has to be deeply rooted in the climate and other things in this. And the same thing, this notion of education. You see, we need to understand, for example, why we are training students, but we have a national government which supposedly to provide basically the jobs that need these students to be utilized for the sake of, let's say, helping them, and at the same time helping the country. So here, localization of knowledge is crucial and critical, but you need also to have an active state that knows exactly what is needed to be done. Then by the time you graduate these students, their jobs will be available. And then you need to have a strategy as of where you are going and what you are going to do in order basically to utilize all this investment in education.
That's a very, very good point. The only fault I can see with that is that governments don't always have that knowledge or that vision to impart. Let me just give you an example.
Yeah.
We've all heard of Tony Blair. And Tony Blair, back in 1997, said, I want to see 50% of youth coming out with a degree. The end result was a degree, not a job. A degree. A degree to do what? So, the vision didn't extend.
Yeah.
An interesting, it was brought to my attention this morning, actually. We were looking at our BSc in computer science. And we're seeing numbers decline on that particular program. And this apparently is a trend, a global trend. Except with Stanford, who are heavily invested in computer science, but not for the skills that are wanted now. but for the AI skills that are going to be needed in 5 or 6 years' time. And I think that's the sort of vision that's talking about.
That's exactly what is needed to be done. And, you know, and that's why they have to be very careful not to jump to the conclusion that we have a knowledge-based economy in the Arab world. We're trying our best to do. We are investing in education, that's right. We are basically building infrastructure. I mean, when you talk about ICT and you are number 30, I mean, as I said, the rate of divorce in some of these countries went by 60%. So what is the use of having the ICT? Where is the knowledge of becoming 54?
Yeah, but the only element that sort of advanced the ICT, the penetration and the number of people, and some of these countries, because they are small as well, or they were seen as the vision of Dubai, we have to be connected and so on. Like in countries like North Africa, it's not as easy to put fiber to the home everywhere. For example, like Bahrain case. We are 30 by 10 miles, you know, and we occupy only 1/3 of the country. Of course, we'll have fiber to the home easier than a country like Egypt. But then, you know, we prepare and we give students skills, you know, for the jobs. But governments and private sector and whoever is responsible to create these jobs as well, you know. So not only prepare them with skills, somebody has to create the job, but that's the model the kids now have to create their own jobs. So, you know, it's not the same anymore.
Yeah, and I just say one more thing and I will stop. Anybody who is interested really to learn about the knowledge-based society in the Arab world, you should read the Arab Human Development Report of 2003. You see, that was a comprehensive kind of knowledge report. And they discussed in detail all the basically problem and the challenges for that. And we still have that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Then basic Arab Human Development Report. Yeah. It's called the Knowledge Deficit, 2003. Arab Human Development. Yeah, Arab Human Development.
So I'm not sure if it's the same case in the Arab world, but in Mexico particularly, we have one of the highest levels of engineers. And we export them all over the world. And the problem is that although there are jobs for engineers in Mexico, the salaries are so low that the level of life that they could attain with these salaries are not very great. So I think we're kind of overlooking that, yes, education is very important, yes, job creation is also very important, but also advocating for livable wages is central to the argument.
That's the incentive part.
Well, that's the problem. The whole system in the Arab world needs to be looked at, and they have to collaborate because not one country can do it alone. And everybody have moved ahead, and if the Arab countries don't do it together, I don't think they have a big chance of succeeding. But they need the will to do that. And of course, these people will look somewhere else. They have better quality of life. Some of our countries pay expats more than we pay our nationals. So, of course, people will move out. And actually, some governments are encouraging them to move out because they can't. They're not creating jobs for them. There's too many problems, too many populations, and so on. So it is. I don't know, very gloomy, but I wish to have hope.
Sorry, I didn't have the time to present my conclusions because it wasn't quite PowerPoint, but anyway. Alam says that we don't have really that much time.
The time for you, yes, because I need to start.
No, because in my conclusion was that before having universities in the knowledge base, you have to universities in good working order, with governance, with ethics, with all these things, with the rights relation with power. So we are at that stage, and the challenge is that I have a paper produced It says universities and power politics games, which has been around for some years. I can send it to you because we definitely have to put all that in our universities. And of course, once you have done that in government, if it's a real thing, then you are in a position to acquire knowledge more easily. But right now, there are maybe not in the Maghreb, in the Maghreb, certainly a lot of problems in the current working of universities.
Then you also have to agree on the metrics by which you're being measured.
Yeah, sure.
And that consultation, certainly in the UK, has not really taken place at all levels. And so you're being measured against something against which you don't necessarily...
What we would call major standard type of universities working in the world. You can understand it, which is average standard of woodworking universities. And then you find out a lot of problems currently which are very, very important to address. And that, of course, unless you address these, then you have a problem into really integrating properly the knowledge society. This is what my conclusion was, but unfortunately it didn't happen actually.
I actually agree totally with what's been said. However, the first question that you raised is what changes do we want to do in our universities, and this is worldwide. We're not talking only about the Arab countries generally. What do we need in order to improve our graduates to be ready for knowledge-based economy, to contribute in the knowledge-based economy? And maybe you tell us what's happening in Britain at a university like in yours, but I can see the movement in the last few years about entrepreneurship very heavily, which means that what the lady was saying, that now actually the graduates are creating, a lot of them are creating their own jobs. So then we need to build these talents in them. This is what we need to do, not just to give them education, but is to build these talents, because also the knowledge is changing and actually everything is changing. The science is changing and everything is changing very fast. So it's more important to give them all the equipments and talents to do that, and for lifelong learning, for all the soft skills we're talking about are very important, for critical thinking and so on, more than just feeding them with the information needed in their specialization. So it has to be balanced, not just feeding them with a lot of...
And they are talking a lot about paradigm shift in education.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's
we don't have time to discuss.
But this is what's needed.
What would you say about it?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, it was a very interesting subject, and the contribution was very significantly important. But what I thought about, because education is, the stakeholders are wide, starting from the student to the institutions. In the middle comes the parents, the business people, comes the government, policymakers. These all have, unless they work together to produce a curriculum that links what is needed in the market and what the country strategically how it's going to go, take steps. I think if you take it pieces by pieces, it will not give fruits. This is what I believe, because I've been in Qatar 2014 in the WISE World Summit. They discussed the education from the baby in his womb of his mother until they go to job. In sequence, people from different countries, they came there, and everybody gives the experience. And I think that was a very good idea, but I didn't see the result of that conference, which is why it's known World Institute or Innovative Summit in Education. It was every 2 years submitted by Qatar. So that is what I think it is hard to be looked at from one point of view. And also There are people who are, for example, in all these statistics, which is not included, like people who are nomadic people. These are not, I came from Eritrea and Sudan, and I know 40%, 30% are people who are living on the marginal. They do not even go to statistics. They do not know what is statistics is. So when there is data and comes like that, especially in the Arab countries and in Africa, people have to think of these people, sector of the people. And thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. And our last comment? Okay.
Yeah, I originate from Aden in Yemen, and throughout all this very interesting presentation, I noticed that Yemen doesn't even come up in the charts.
Comes up a lot down.
But at least it's right at the bottom there.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that in a situation like Yemen, where it needs some kind of effort to lift this, because everything is being talked about, countries which has a lot of wealth that can support institutions and so on. Now we know that Yemen had 1,000 years of war, but it also had 1,000 years of innovation, localization in agriculture, in hydraulic works, in a variety of ways. And for that reason, and unfortunately, in the last few decades, Ali Abdullah Saleh ruined a lot of this. But the knowledge is still there, to the extent that the FAO, Food and Agriculture, kept sending experts to Yemen to learn from the Yemeni farmers dry farming and terrace farming and water control and a variety, and then they spread it into other countries. So I believe the bases are there, for which is indigenous, on the basis of what you're saying. And all it needs is a lifting, really. And we all know that
Marshall Plan.
Sorry?
Marshall Plan.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, I also call it Marshall Plan, but it's a real Marshall Plan that is coming after the war. The war is dying. We know that. It's going to go soon. And we also know that there is an intention to do a Marshall Plan in terms of money and reconstructions and so on. The only fear I have is the fact that that money might be wasted in the same manner as the Saleh regimes and all the corruption and so on. And therefore I believe there ought to be a focus on rebuilding the economy on the basis of appropriate knowledge-based economy. We're talking at a high level there, but there is, all it needs is small things, that can help the farmers regain their productive capacity and so on. Because none of the tribes in Yemen has moved from their areas for thousands of years. That means that they have some kind of sustainability, right? In terms of their agriculture, in terms of obviously, a lot of the money also comes through war, through external, manipulators and so on. But I think it's a good case that we ought to focus on, especially in the basis that it's one of the low economy. You see, like Korea sent people to learn, and they got Malaysia and other places to do the backward, the low technology work. Now, if we envisage that the Gulf states will want to have the Yemen as part of it, and in fact, they have no other choice but to do so for their own security. They will have to raise the level of the economy, rehabilitate it, and I think this area, they could start with that.
And then you have to move out of the carpet production. And
Thank you very much, everyone. Fascinating afternoon. I wish we had longer, but sorry.
Please remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.